Thanks, Stephen AJ. So if someone were to tell me last year, hey, Natalie, next year, this time, you're going to be right in the middle of a global pandemic that's going to impact your life personally and professionally forever. And on top of that, there's going to be a significant conversation happening that's going to be focused on equality and racism that could potentially change everything. I don't think I would have believed them. It's been unexpected, right? And here's the thing. When we get big storms in our life, almost always they're unexpected. And that's what makes them stressful. That's what creates the stress in our life that sometimes feels unmanageable. And here's the thing. On top of that, we also still have the demands that are in our professional life. We have the demands coming our way professionally as well as demands coming at us personally. And so it is no surprise to me that I am here today talking about resiliency. What I'm going to share with you today is how to create resilient teams. In addition to that, I'm going to be talking about a couple other strategies around how you can create resiliency individually in your life. So you can take on those big storms in your life, you can maintain and keep up with the demand, and also maintain good health and balance in your life. And so where I'm going to start today is with the team within the organization. And I want to start off by telling you a story about a study that was done at Google. Now at Google, they recognized, like many organizations out there, that there are specific teams within the organization that seem to be extremely resilient. Not only are they resilient, but they're able to keep up with demands and sustain performance. In addition to recognizing this, they also recognize that there's other teams that are doing the opposite. Not really so resilient, not able to keep up with the pace, and they're two different groups. And so what Google decided to do is they wanted to study the teams that were most resilient. Their study was called Project Aristotle. In this study, what they found were 5 very specific characteristics that represent a resilient team. And at the top of that 5, they noticed that these teams have what is called psychological safety. Psychological safety simply means that you feel you can show up to your team, you can take risks, you can be honest, you can push back when needed, and you don't feel like there's going to be a consequence to your job or even to the conversation. When we're able to create psychological safety within our teams, this drives innovation, collaboration, creativity, and connection. And so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to bring Chris and Shelly up here on stage with me because they're going to show you an example of what psychological safety is and what psychological safety isn't. And so I've asked Chris to share an example of, what's a really great idea that he has, and he's going to share it with Shelly, and they're going to have a conversation.
All right, I've spent some time on this, and so I'm thinking of a mobile dog bakery company.
Why a mobile dog bakery? They're not gluten-free.
We could try to make gluten-free bakery items for pets.
Do you actually think you could make a profit off that?
Possibly. I don't know yet.
You should probably look at the numbers, shouldn't you?
Well, I don't know if there's a lot of companies like that, and so...
Yeah, probably because it's not a need.
I don't know. There's a lot of dogs out there that like to eat, baked goods.
Does your dog like baked goods?
Eats everything.
Yes, then why don't you just give him leftover chicken?
So I'm going to stop them there. And I just want to really ask you some questions, Chris. So
Okay.
As you're sharing this great new idea that you have, how did that feel in the way that Shelly's responding?
Closed-minded.
Yeah. Does it make you feel like you trust her and you want to share more ideas with her?
No.
Yeah. And does it feel like perhaps that she is agreeing with you and moving forward?
No.
Yeah, not at
She's
all.
not agreeing with me at all.
Not at all. So let's try it again. And this time we'll change it up just a little bit, but same thing, Chris. Share the same idea with Shelly.
I think that we should start a mobile dog bakery company.
Oh, that's a cool idea. Could you tell me what sparked that interest for you?
Well, I just feel like there's first of all, the pet industry is huge. And so I was trying to think of something that might be new and innovative, and I see that we as humans like food delivered to them, so I thought maybe there could be a food delivery for special bakery items.
Have you looked at the numbers that might be involved with that?
I haven't yet, but it's just been a new idea.
Yeah, I'm really interested, and I'd love to help you look at those numbers and see how we can make this feasible.
Thank you. So whole different experience. And I know standing here with Chris and Shelley, I felt a little bit more energy the second time around. And I want to ask Chris how he felt. So how did that conversation feel to you?
Like I had a partner in the idea. And so even if it's not feasible, there's a willingness to check it out.
And if you had another idea in the future, would you feel like you could share that with Shelley?
I do.
What about the first time?
Oh, I wouldn't share with another idea with her at all.
So thank you. I appreciate your help. And I think, what I'm trying to point out here is this was just a little example of someone's intention coming into a conversation. And so in the first conversation with Shelley, the intention was, and what I told Shelley to do is the intention is, I'm smarter than him and this idea is dumb. And so that could be a reaction that many of us might have to different ideas that other people on our team have. In our head, we're thinking, I don't think that's valuable. That might not contribute very well to what we're trying to accomplish. But that, spoken out loud, does not contribute to the psychological safety needed to make the team feel safe and connected. And so again, it's coming in with an intention of, regardless of what I think in my head, I want the intention to be that I want the person to be valued and that I care about what they are saying. And so for us in teams and organizations, the way that we create psychological safety is with our own conversations in our circle of influence, coming in with an intention of, regardless of what they say, I care, I want them to feel heard, and I want them to be valued. And so we just saw a demonstration of a one-on-one conversation really, really quick, but you can imagine how this would have a more significant impact if this is how teams and groups were always functioning, where people felt safe to share their ideas, where people felt supported and they felt like they were heard. And so I challenge you today to think about either a person or maybe a team that exists within your organization that you feel like there's some opportunity there for them to be maybe a little bit more innovative, maybe a little bit more creative, maybe to be able to move forward a little bit more quickly and have better performance. And in that situation, how could you as an individual contribute in a way that you make that person or that team feel safe and feel heard? So for example, if you have a person who's on your team and they come up with an idea and in your head you think, I don't think that's a valuable idea. In your team, what's a typical response that you would see? Is that response, well, that's a great idea, that sounds great, but we really need to move on to this agenda. We have another meeting after this, we need to move on. Or could you be more intentional and say, I've never thought of that before. I've never thought of that idea before. We don't really have a lot of time right now, but I would love to talk to you about this offline. I respect your ideas and values, and could we set up a time offline where we could talk and dig in a little deeper into this concept that you have? So strategy number one, creating the psychological safety that is needed to create the creativity, connection, and innovation that we need to move into our future and create the resiliency and comeback so we show up as the best version of ourselves. The next strategy that I want to share with you has to do a little bit more with your personal resilience. And I know for me, this is a strategy that works every day and has the biggest impact on how I'm able to manage my stress. I'll share with you, my background is in performance psychology, exercise physiology, performance nutrition, and in my field of work, things don't really change that much. The physiology of the body doesn't change, food doesn't impact your body necessarily that differently, but here's the thing about stress, it has changed. We used to tell people, and all of you have probably heard this, and all of you have been trained this, that stress, it's bad. It impacts performance negatively. It's exhausting. Stress impacts our health in a very negative way. We need to manage our stress. We need to protect ourselves from stress. We need to protect our teams and other people from stress. But here's the thing. There's new science on stress, and what it's telling us is we have been wrong. Stress is not necessarily negative at all. As a matter of fact, stress is just stress. What really impacts how that stress impacts us and our teams is our perception of that stress. So what I want you to do for me right now is I want you to think about the biggest stressor that you have in your life right now. Whatever it is, whatever comes to mind first, I want you to think about it. If you have a pen, you can write down what that stress is. And think about, with regards to this stress, what makes it stressful? What are the barriers that exist? How does that stress impact me in a negative way? And as you're thinking about this specific stress, I want you to think about in one word. If you could describe how that stress makes you feel, what would that word be? And so I'm going to invite Chris and Shelly back up again. And they too are thinking about this big stressor that they have in their life. And I'm going to ask both of you in one word, if you can describe how that stressor makes you feel. Chris, what's your word?
Overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Mine is out of control.
So a couple words in there.
Hyphens.
So overwhelmed and out of control. Thank you. You guys can go sit back down. An easy one for you. And so I do this activity a lot, especially with the release of all this new science around stress. I ask people, think about your biggest stress. Now tell me, in one word, how does that stress make you feel? 99.9% of the time, I get responses like Chris and Shelly had. I feel out of control. I feel overwhelmed. I did this activity with a group I had a couple days ago, and one person said, I feel abandoned. I feel not prepared. And so there's a theme there of negativity. And here's the thing. When the theme or the story in our head is negative, that directly impacts our behavior. It directly impacts our ability to be resilient and move forward. And again, as I've mentioned, we have been trained, myself as a professional and even those in our communities and in our organizations, we've been trained that stress is bad. And I'm here to tell you today that stress is not necessarily bad. It is our perception that actually is what impacts our body, our mind, our performance, our relationships, and the way that we move forward. So I'm going to introduce you to a strategy that really looks closer at perception. And I'm going to introduce this to you by just telling you a story. This is a story of an experience that I had about 2 years ago where I really got to see this type of mindset change in action. So I am here in Sarasota, Florida, and I got a phone call from Moffitt Cancer Center, which is north of here. They're a client of mine. I've worked with them in the past. And in the past, I've worked with their leadership and worked with their teams on trying to create sustained high performance. But this time they called me, and what they said was, Natalie, we need you to come and work with us. But this time, it's not with our clinicians or our leaders. We want you to work with our patients. We're doing an event for our patients. These are our cancer patients. We're going to have about 100 cancer patients in a room. You've got an hour with them, and we want you to teach them about how to be resilient. Now, I'll be honest, I was nervous. I thought, how am I going to teach people who have cancer how to be more resilient? And then they added in one more little nugget for me. They said, you're going to have a group of 100, but lots of them are in really, really bad shape. Many of them have been through bone marrow transplant, and about 60% of your audience is terminal. So you have 60% of the audience who is dying from cancer, the rest have cancer, and in many cases we're unsure of their future. Go teach them about resilience. And so what I did is I thought, I'm going to use a strategy that I know of, which is called cognitive reframing. Now, cognitive reframing literally means I'm going to look at a situation or a circumstance, and I'm going to frame it in a different way so that it impacts me and my mindset in a more positive way. And what I did with them is I asked them as a team, what is your biggest stress in your life right now? And to no one's surprise, they all said, I have cancer, or they said, I'm dying of cancer. And I challenged them. I said, where's the positive? Have you learned anything? Is there any positive in this stress that exists into your life? And to my surprise, not only were they willing to share, but they couldn't wait to share. They stood up loud and proud and wanted to share their stories. And what they said were things like, if I wasn't diagnosed with cancer, I would have never repaired that relationship with my mom, with my sister, with my brother, with my friend. You could fill in the blank. If I wasn't diagnosed with cancer, I would have never recognized what my true purpose is in my life. If I wasn't diagnosed with cancer, I would never have paid attention to my health. If I wasn't diagnosed with cancer, I would have never really realized what's most important in my life. If I wasn't diagnosed with cancer, I would have never met this person sitting next to me who in many cases on that day, that was their caregiver. They kept coming with more and more strength and optimism around their situation. And so my thoughts today are, if my cancer patients can do that, then we can do the same. When you're thinking about the stress in your life that we thought about earlier, that big stress, the one that might make you feel out of control or overwhelmed, is there any opportunity? I want you to think about, are there opportunities for you to improve as a person? Are there opportunities within this stress for you to identify your real purpose? Are there opportunities within this stress for you to connect with people that you might not have been able to connect with before? Are there opportunities for you to learn a new skill? Will this stress make you more resilient emotionally in the future? And I want you to just sit on those questions for a minute, maybe take some notes if you like, but think about that. Thinking about the same stress you identified a couple minutes ago. Where's the opportunity? Can you reframe that stress to pull out opportunity? So I'm going to bring Chris and Shelly back up here one last time. And I just want both of you to consider those questions. When you consider the opportunity, the connections, the potential of resiliency that could be developed, in one word, describe how that stress makes you feel.
You want to go first?
My word would be present.
Good. I like it.
That's a good one.
Yes.
Almost the one I was going to use. At ease, maybe. I know that's two words.
Yeah.
But a little bit more at ease.
So at ease, maybe a little bit
realize
relieved.
what's important. So you're more at ease about whatever situation you're in. In my current situation, while I may feel overwhelmed, I feel a little bit more at ease.
Yeah. And so I'm going to ask both of you, what did it take for you to reframe and rethink? What literally had to happen? And
Perspective.
yeah.
Right? So you were sharing about that perspective with from someone that has terminal cancer. And so our perspective looks a little differently because we're not dealing with like those end of life situations. So certainly the perspective had to change.
Yeah. Anything from you, Shelly?
Yeah, and I mean, part of my story played into it, but I could see like in the valleys of the past and be able to be like, oh, so much good also came out of that. And so for you to reframe that, I was like, I know what gratitude looks like. And so I was like, what are you grateful for in this valley?
Yes. Thank you so much. That was really valuable. And I think both perspective and being able to look back at how you've grown in past situations can help you in moving forward and becoming more resilient. The real thing that has to happen in a practical way is we need to pause. We as human beings tend to be really, really reactive. The stress comes our way and we react in the moment. We don't think, we react. Here's COVID, let's just respond to the stress. Here comes the demands at work, let's respond. And so as humans, we get used to responding to our circumstance, our environment, and other people without pausing to rethink, look at the perspective, or even think about past similar situations. And so what ultimately needs to happen in real life, today even, when you leave, is we need to create some intentionality around a pause. We need to create the space so that we can reflect, we can take space to reframe, so that we can pull out the positive. When we're able to change our mindset from being overwhelmed to being more present or turning that mindset into a more positive mindset, again, that impacts our behaviors directly. It's as simple as if I walk into work feeling overwhelmed, I'm going to act differently, physically, mentally, emotionally. The conversations are different. But if I walk into work and I feel present, that's a whole different person. And that's going to help create resiliency for you and other people on your team. The last strategy that I'm going to talk about today has to do with that pause. Because here's the thing about the pause. We need some intentionality around that pause in our life so we can take the time to reframe and get our mindset thinking in a positive way so that our behaviors are more ideal. Within that pause, there are things that we can do that contribute to our own self-care and well-being. So our self-care, our physical, emotional, and mental self-care is highly important in being resilient, because when we're in a good place physically, emotionally, and mentally, and intuitively, we all know this, we're able to respond to stress better. It's walking into the storm and feeling good and positive and energized and focused versus walking into the storm feeling exhausted, unfocused, anxious, and overwhelmed. You can feel the difference. Our well-being is the foundation for us to move forward and be resilient, showing up as the best version of ourselves. We can contribute to our well-being within that intentional pause that we use so that we can reframe our stress and move forward in a different way. And what I mean by that is, instead of reacting and responding in the moment, take a little time. Ask for a little time if you need to. Do you mind if I take a couple minutes to think, and then let's revisit this issue in 15 minutes? Or maybe if you pause, you recognize there is no real reason to react or respond right now. Let me go take a walk. Let me change my environment and get outside for a little bit. Let me just stand up and stretch. Let me put some music on so I can feel inspired by the music. Let me go exercise for a little bit and think through my thoughts and allow time for that cognitive reframing to happen. I call that a twofer. You create the space that's needed to reframe, and while you're creating that space, you're contributing to your own well-being and self-care. And so what I'm leaving you with today are 3 different strategies. We have the strategy of psychological safety that can be created by you as individuals and teams to create teams that are high-performing, connected to each other, collaborative, and creative. You also have this new strategy that you actually utilize today in reframing the way that you think about your own stress. Where's the opportunity? How can I grow? And then finally, taking the time and energy to contribute to your own self-care, whatever it is that you need, physically, emotionally, and mentally, so you can create that foundation of resiliency and move forward and show up as the best version of yourself. Thank you for having me today.